Hello, good morning to everyone. I think we're going to start. 5 minutes already passed, so hopefully more people will come as the event develops. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking time from your busy agendas here at the NDM and joining us today at this conversation that we call Pathways to Access, Mine Action Through Community Engagement. My name is Carlos Cortés Ladino. I work at the Office of the Peace Commissioner, which is the Colombian Mine Action Authority in the country. I work as an advisor on cooperation and international affairs, and I'm honored to be the moderator of today's event. Around the world, one of the biggest challenges in humanitarian mine action is not technical, it's about access. Access to territories, access to people, and access to the kind of trust that allow us to do our work effectively and ethically. And this access is easier when communities are involved genuinely and early on, and when this happens, trust grows, and so does the impact of mine action. By integrating conflict transformation and by prioritizing community-based risk education, and by listening to the real priorities of affected populations, mine action operators have opened doors that will otherwise remain closed, and more than that, they've created conditions where land, once cleared, can truly be used again by people who live in those territories. We'll hear today about the ground challenges of doing mine action in areas where humanitarian access is limited, and from operators and donors about best practices, lessons learned, and what's working, especially in complex conflict-affected settings all over the world. So let me briefly introduce our splendid group of panelists today. First, we have Dr. Peter Rouse, a diplomat with over 30 years of experience in foreign policy, humanitarian affairs, and multilateral engagement. He currently serves at the head of division of FS07 at German Federal Foreign Office, where he oversees key aspects of mine action and humanitarian policy. His career includes high-level roles across the German government and European institutions. We have Sofia Cogollos. Sofia is a professional in government and international relations with postgraduate studies in human rights and international humanitarian law. Sofia has worked in the humanitarian mine action sector for 13 years and has experience in countries such as Colombia, the Philippines, Libya, and Iraq. She is currently the Global Risk Education Specialist for Humanity and Inclusion. Lisa Mueller-Dorman, as Humanitarian Disarmament and Peacebuilding Coordinator, Lisa manages the DRC Advocacy on Mine Action and Peacebuilding in Geneva, and also serves as the Global Mine Action Area of Responsibility co-coordinator as part of the Global Protection Cluster. And finally, Soline Auve, sorry if my pronunciation of any name is not correct, is a specialist in dialogue, mediation, and peace processes with deep field experiences across the Sahel and broader Francophone Africa. Since joining the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue in 2014, she has led critical initiatives into community dialogue and conflict mediation. In 2019, she was appointed Deputy Regional Director for Francophone Africa, where she now supports local and political mediation processes across West and Central Africa. So I'm honored to guide this discussion and share insights from Colombia, where we sadly face these challenges every day and have seen how critical the community is to every step of the processes that mine action involves. So I'll start talking about briefly about the case of Colombia. So to share the Colombian perspective is to say first that Colombia is a country that continues to face significant challenges in implementing mine action, especially in areas where access is limited or compromised. First and foremost, the reality in the ground is shaped by security conditions in Colombia, the ongoing presence of armed groups and their influence over communities. In many areas, these dynamics create not only logistical, but also technical barriers and ethical and social dilemmas for mine action operators and authorities in the field. In the map shows, the presentation highlights a clear overlap between areas experiencing humanitarian emergencies, which is the map to your right. Sorry, it's in Spanish, but that's how we work. So that the map on your this map, is the localization of humanitarian crisis right now in the country. And the map on the other side shows the affectation by explosive ordnance in the country. So it's clear that we see an overlap between the two maps, and that demonstrates that mine action is not only a safety issue, but in Colombia is strongly linked with humanitarian access to these regions. We, as a national authority, must be extremely careful, because every humanitarian action that we take, no matter how well-intentioned, must avoid causing further harm to already affected communities, whether directly or indirectly. This means that every activity, every message must be designed with the protection and well-being of the community at its starting point. One of our greatest challenges in these communities is trust, or rather, the lack of trust. Decades of conflict, isolation, and manipulation by armed groups have left many communities deeply skeptical of external actors, whether these external actors are organizations or representative of the national government. In some places, simply arriving is not enough. You have to gain the trust of communities, and that only happens when people perceive that humanitarian actions are truly there for them and to attend their real needs. That's where community-based approach have made a real difference in our country. By involving community from the very beginning, not just as beneficiaries, but also as active participants, we've been able to overcome some of this initial resistance. When mine action responds directly to those priorities that the communities themselves have identified, it gains legitimacy. People see that we're not imposing a solution. They see that we're listening, and that changes everything in these operations. It is also crucial to understand that the social fabric of each community is different. What are their concerns? Who are the leaders? What stories are they carrying? And without that understanding, even the most technically tailored intervention can fall short, or worse, become harmful to these communities. That's why we rely heavily on local social structures and leadership. Their involvement is not only increases acceptance, but it also lowers risk, and it helps us identify the specific barriers that each community faces. Through this community mapping, we gain insight that we will never get otherwise. These approaches promote not just trust, but also co-responsibility and ownership. And that's what leads these operations to sustainability in these territories. Of course, there are many challenges: lack of infrastructure, limited capacity in local institutions, lack of resources, misinformation about the objective of mine action operations. But we've seen that when communities are genuinely involved in these projects, when they feel safe, respected, and heard, then even the most difficult territories can become accessible. And that is how I want to begin this conversation with the case of Colombia, and I would really like now to hear from the panelists their thoughts and impressions on related to this matter. So I wanted to begin with Sofia and Lisa, who have plenty of experience through their work with mine action civil organizations. So the question that I would have for you is, how have you integrated community-based activities into your mine action programs? And what have you learned in terms of impact, innovation, and what are the challenges that come with implementing these approaches, especially when it comes to improving access in contaminated areas? So I don't know if Sofia perhaps wants to start. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for the invitation to this side event. We might not have all the answers, but we are going to present some of the experiences that has worked with us, for us at Humanity and Inclusion. And good morning to everybody in the dear group of panelists that are here next to me today. So, in HI, we implement an approach that goes beyond traditional humanitarian mine action, and we call armed violence reduction. The idea of this approach is that we go beyond the traditional activities that we do, and we want to focus in addressing the short-term impacts of the contamination, but also the long-term impacts of that contamination and the root causes of that contamination. And for that, we have a specific component that is called conflict transformation, and it has been key in some of the experiences that I will share today, in which we generate some spaces of dialogue to transform a bit those conflict dynamics that exist in the communities where we have worked. To the main question, how do we do HMA in like challenging environments? We believe there are like 5 keys to that. The first one is conflict sensitivity. We need to start all of our activities, and I'm pretty sure, Lisa, you will share a bit more about that, but we need to make sure we understand the conflict dynamics inside the communities. We understand what can cause harm, what can also potentialize our intervention, and in that way we plan our interventions. And that means planning, designing proposals in that sense, but also training our staff and to all the time assessing how are the dynamics of the situation changing and then adjusting the intervention accordingly. Then, of course, meaningful community engagement. And we say meaningful because it's not only about gathering people and then ticking the box, they came, they participate, but involving the communities from the beginning, from the needs assessment in the process to properly adjust the intervention to their needs. And also, we were speaking about all the issues related to trust. So they are sure that the intervention that we are going to do is truly benefiting them. Another element that is key is having a multi-sectoral intervention. So when we are working in challenging contexts, it's not only, we might come with our mine action vision, but the needs are big. So we really need to try to look everything that is happening. And it doesn't mean we need to be all multi-sectoral organizations like DRC or HI, but we can do the link with the other actors that are working in the area and make sure our interventions are connected. Then, of course, we need to have an inclusive approach, making sure that those who are most vulnerable are benefiting from the intervention also. And then risk management. So it means assessing all the time the risks of the intervention, the risks that this might have related to security, to the communities, to our teams, but also assessing other things like ethics, concerns that we might have intervening or not in some area or working or not with some actors, and then also reputational risks too. So this is a process that we do during the full intervention. So I'm going to present 3 examples from 3 different countries where we have been implementing this AVR approach. The first one, and we spoke a lot in the CPP side event that was conducted on Wednesday and led by the GICHD, and it's like how we intervene as soon as the recent crisis started in Gaza. So something really important is that we had some previous experience in the area. We were building capacities there for a while, and we had an existing network of volunteers. So as soon as the crisis started, we contacted those volunteers that were still available and willing to cooperate, and then we retrained. We added some elements of conflict preparedness and protection to that training, and then they started to conduct sessions right away. At the moment, we have reached more than 400,000 participants in sessions. They have, I was reading these numbers this morning, and I was like, wow, they have really, really committed a lot to do these prevention activities. But it was also key doing coordination with other HMA actors, and I think in this crisis this worked really well. So we worked a lot with MPA, who were already delivering CPP activities in the region, and then it's like we exchanged materials. It was really one of the greatest examples of coordination, I would say. Also integrating with other sectors. So we integrated MHPSS activities in the risk education activities that we were doing. So not only having the volunteers train in psychological first aid, but also having social workers joining the sessions to be able to support if something happened, and then providing also psychosocial support to the volunteers, because of course they are also part and really involved in the crisis. and then doing risk assessment to decide if we are going to do or not emergency marking of the areas that are found contaminated. And this in particular, we keep assessing all the time if this is something that we continue adjusting. And it's not only about like, okay, we do the risk assessment, we decide not to go. It's more about like what are the mitigation measures that we are going to do to continue making sure the people remain safe. Then, of course, the Colombia case, in which HI has been working in Colombia since 2005. We used to have a strong focus on victim assistance and inclusion, but then since 2017, we got accredited to conduct clearance activities, and then we have been implementing our comprehensive approach in the region. We are really proud of the community engagement approach we have implemented there. I'm getting the time. we are really proud of the intervention that we had there, because we have community liaison officers that were selected by the community. So they nominate, they vote, and they say, these are the people that we want to liaise with the organization. And then we had one case in particular in which we had an assignment to intervene in an area, and we were, and then the conditions changed. When we were about to start, the conditions changed. It was not possible to enter, to start doing, to even speak about explosive ordnance. The communities had a lot of fear. But they told us, please don't leave us. Like, we know we cannot speak about this topic now, but please don't go. And then we restructured the intervention, focusing it more in like protection, training on like how to develop contingency plans, and these kind of things. And it's key also when we work in this kind of context that we have some flexibility from the donors that allow us to say, okay, we are not going to deliver all the square meters cleared for this intervention, but we are still going to find a way to support these communities. And then I'm going to mention this one quickly, because, well, this is just a photo of a conflict sensitivity session that we did with the teams in Colombia. I'm going to mention it quickly because Solene is going to go into more detail about that, even though Senegal is not a super challenging context compared to the other ones that I mentioned. We want to share some experience in how liaising with other actors coming from other sectors involving dialogue, conflict transformation, etc., can also be a good experience that can replicate it in a country like Colombia, where there are also ongoing peace talks, and how can we, in some of the most challenging communities, intervene in a way, and then in the others we can work also to build trust in the community, also in the peace process that is coming. So we did their participatory diagnostics, we were working in supporting community committees, and then just to close, just the main conclusions is Mine Action should look at the full picture. So not only the full humanitarian crisis that is happening and finding ways to connect with that crisis. Then second, Mine Action must be comprehensive. We should find a way to integrate the pillars as much as we can and in the right moment, but it's really important if we can start with risk education but still incorporate some elements of victim assistance. It's key that we do it, at least collecting data, at least providing psychosocial support. Mine Action must liaise with other sectors, even if we are not a multi-sectoral actor. And then, of course, community should always be at the center of the activities that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sofia. So perhaps if Lisa could continue with her thoughts.
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for inviting DRC to be part of this panel on community engagement. There's a lot of similarities between the work of the Danish Refugee Council and HI. Sorry, I'm having challenges. Here we go. So there are a lot of similarities between the approach that the Danish Refugee Council takes, as well as what HI takes. We also ground all of our work in a comprehensive conflict sensitivity analysis. So we sort of work from the assumption that any sort of explosive item can erode the social fabric of a community. And so if you work from that assumption, then you know that there's a lot of benefits and a lot of enabling elements that mine action can have as an activity. So conflict sensitivity analysis is key, and we, of course, need to go beyond the general sort of traditional mine action square meter work, but include the whole branch of the various sectors. And DRC is a multi-mandate organization, so we work across the nexus. We have other sectors that we work in: shelter, protection, economic recovery, and then humanitarian disarmament and peace building. And on the slide, you see the places where we are currently active. You will see that it's mainly contexts that are highly impacted by displacement challenges and displacement crises. So I think as we are talking about how to address and how to deal with community engagement, I think the question of doable solutions and returns is absolutely key. So I'm not quite sure how. Yeah, I feel like I'm too far away. Yeah, so I wanted to start with briefly defining conflict sensitivity analysis. It was something that Sophia already mentioned, but it's a principle that I think sometimes is not as well understood within the mine action community. I think people don't understand that there's a difference between do no harm and conflict sensitivity. We have to go beyond and do the assessment regularly, comprehensively. It's grounded in sort of an intersectional analysis as well, and it's about trying to understand the dynamics and acting upon it, and then adapting our response to it. So the next slide, thank you. And so for DRC, we have a toolkit at global level. We've done conflict sensitivity analysis as part of our programming when DRC was still DDG, so the Danish Demining Group, and now that we're part of DRC, we've rolled out, or we're rolling out the toolkit across our different programs. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that we've in the past years, we've done a lot of trainings that across various regions, various members of staff, including training of trainees components, so that these trainings actually are continued when we leave the location, and so that partners can replicate it, and then that we follow up the analysis that we have. So let me dive into a couple of examples, mainly from Yemen and from South Sudan. Our conflict sensitivity is reflected through the various prioritization efforts that we do. So when we engage with communities and when we prioritize different land release efforts, we analyze the situation, and then we have prioritization matrices that then inform where we do land release. And in South Sudan, if you go to the next slide, we've cooperated and built on existing work that was done through peace building, where we've trained and worked with communities that have been part of peace building activities, where we've held dialogue forums and formed peace committees. And then these peace committees were spreading some of the risk education messages, and where we were able to increase our access as a result of that, including across the border, because many of in the communities where we work, this was in Akobo, many of the communities are highly transient and move from South Sudan to Ethiopia and vice versa. And so it was very important that these peace committees are spreading those messages, including because there were seasonal challenges due to climate change, etc. And in Afghanistan, we've also done these multi-sectoral assessments right before and during our clearance efforts, so that we can follow up with economic recovery interventions after our clearance. And in Yemen, for example, we've worked with the Ministry of Education to ensure that risk education messages are spread in schools. And so I think in the next slide, I think one of the main messages that I'd always like to emphasize is that localization is extremely key, and it came out from Sophia's presentation already. On the picture you see the cooperation that we have in Sudan with JASMAR, which is very key to sort of for our risk education efforts, but it needs to be built on an equal partnership, and there needs to be an understanding of risk management and support and complementarity. So this is very key, but also selecting and
Starts again.
selecting and knowing which local partners are the best placed must be grounded in conflict sensitivity analysis, right? Localization should not be a tick box exercise only. And for DRC, this is an operational principle. So we have a strategic objective that we are implementing most of our efforts through local actors by 2030. So lastly, I also wanted to share an example from Colombia, where we have roving risk education teams to further reach some of the refugee and migrant and displaced population. And we also participate in community work to support some of the community I guess efforts that are there outside of the mine action scope. So to support the community to maintain schools and roads and vegetation. So we have sort of a community day where we work together with the communities in which we work, and that builds trust. Lastly, I think those kind of community engagement efforts, they take sort of consistency. They need continuity in order to build trust. So I think advocacy for these kind of efforts is also extremely key. So DRC has engaged in different types of research to sort of make the case for more outcome-related efforts and more community-led efforts on mine action. One of them is a study that was done in Colombia on explosive ordnance and food security, which has demonstrated that often transient zones are the ones most contaminated, and that sort of underlines the message that we need to be engaging with these groups of the population more effectively. And then lastly, of course, we have one other study that we've already presented on during this NDM, which was really about trying to understand the connection between mine action and livelihoods, and how can we measure outcomes more effectively. And I wanted to close with this because the graph really clearly shows that safety is a behavior, and it's a highly complex aspect and concept, and it doesn't necessarily depend on the clearance of one task site, right? People might not feel safe as a result of the clearance of one task site because they know that there might be other areas that need clearance, or they might feel safe on certain activities but not on others. So it's really important that we make that difference between appropriation and contribution. Mine action contributes to outcomes, and we can enable and support safety of communities, but it's by far not the only response. And the National Mine Action Authority and our cooperation with the local partners is key, but it also can vary across the context, and it's not static. So understanding these dynamics and responding to it is quite important. I'm happy to talk more about the study in the Q&A. I'll leave it at that. You can download it through the QR code. But yeah, happy to hear some questions, and great to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa and Sophia, for these highlights of the work that operators do in affected countries. I would like now to pass on to Dr. Peter Rouse, So, from your perspective as a donor representative, how can donor states best support mine-affected countries in overcoming these access challenges, and what good practices have you seen in projects funded by Germany that that are worth highlighting in this panel? Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. I will come to all these points later on. Unfortunately, I don't have slides from the donor perspective, so I don't have the technical challenges either. I will comment on what you have said. I have to say I'm deeply impressed what you said, both of you, three of you. From the donor perspective, let me go one step back before going into details. I would just want to recall the humanitarian principles. Impartiality, neutrality, independence, humanity. I don't have to explain them. We're in Geneva, everybody knows about them, but sometimes it's good that this is the raison d'etre of our help, that we focus to the people. It's not only to dig out the landmines or whatever we do, and therefore, Carlos, I liked very much that you said, don't do further harm. Because sometimes we forget, we're so focused on our job and we forget about what we're doing as side effects for nature, for the communities, for the living together of the population in the field, on the ground. I don't have all this experience you have, therefore we are very much dependent on what you are, our ears and our eyes, and we live from the good cooperation with you and to speak to you and the cooperation on a daily, weekly, daily basis. I would say that we learn what is the situation on the field. What we can do from our side is to get the money from the taxpayers' money from our parliaments and to be as convincing as possible to get the engagement done. And therefore, we have to have the best arguments why you continue to work in this very difficult context. That's what we can do, and then with your help, we can control the implementation on the jobs, on the tasks we are working on, and to live with you as closely as possible where the challenges are. And another key word, I think, is to be flexible, because the situation, especially in conflict areas, might change from one day to the next. If you do mine action in areas like in Cambodia and Sri Lanka, where the way is paved and we can do it with all the problems we face over there, our job from day to day, but in Colombia, for instance, where you have a very difficult situation again, or in Ukraine, where luckily you both of your organizations are working hand in hand for us with a victim assistance program, which is really, really important. But there you have you have to show flexibility, because in conflict areas you cannot plan ahead for many years. I was amazed. In Germany we have a new government now, and in Germany we have this practice to write a coalition treaty. And the coalition treaty oversees the forthcoming 4 years, and they did it 3 years ago without knowing that there is a war in Ukraine, without knowing beforehand. They didn't know there is COVID, and we could only expect that Trump will come in power again. You cannot foresee it. You have to be flexible and to make quick decisions, even if you have a long-lasting partnership, to give our partner security on their work on the field. Let me take another example, Afghanistan. What we can do for the local population there. We can focus on women, because that's the biggest problem in Afghanistan, that women are pulled back to their houses. And if in the mine action we focus on women, we create jobs for them. We give them the possibility to go out of their house. We have female leaders because they are accepted. Men are not accepted to work together with women. But if we have female leaders and female workers on the ground, we create a new self-confidence as well. And we give them money, and they can finance their households, and we can enhance their role in their family themselves. So this is something we can do in the ground. The next example I wanted to give is Iraq, where we could, together with GICHD, write a new strategy, like our strategy where you have all these elements on localizations, do no harm, etc. And we could do it in a joint effort with the Iraqi central government based in Baghdad and the area, the Kurdish areas together. You know, this is something has an impact as well, because it's not only Baghdad and Erbil. There are a lot of people in the areas in between where the Yazid people are, or in Kirkuk, which is always a disputed area, and bring people together there with a common strategy, and to say this is our common job to do the mine action there can be very helpful to come close to the population. If I may add one more sentence, localization is key for us, because to speak to people there, we can learn so many things. They know where, not only where the mines are physically, but they know more about the conflict that we could ever know, because they know where the battles took place. They know where the problems that the internally displaced people are living, whether they come back, where the problems are. They know about the history of all these conflicts. We come from the outside and we want to help, but if we want to help really, we have first understand what people feel, where they are the best teachers to us, and we just have to have open eyes to listen to them, and then we can, I think, convince our parliamentarians so much better why we have to go there, what we can do there, if we know what is really taking place on the ground. And then the problems will stay for a long time, so we cannot focus only on short-term action. We have to work on a long level. We try this with you, with long-lasting partnerships. Unfortunately, our budget allows us just to go from year to year, but sometimes we can go further, and we have programs with you lasting for 3 or even more years, and therefore you can give you the perspectives, but we have to find the possibility to convince our parliamentarians on a long-term range to be effective and efficient in these conflict areas. I stop by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. That was pretty insightful from the perspective of donors and how can information go from communities to the donors, which is a long route for information to manage. Okay, so I will finally pass on to Solin. This is exciting because it's bringing the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue into a discussion, which is not per se a mine action organization. So these fresh thoughts can be really important for the discussion. So Solin, based on your experience liaising with mine action actors in contexts like Senegal, what challenges and opportunities have you observed? And from your perspective as a non-mine actor, mine action actor, how do you see the sector engaging with communities, particularly when it comes involving them in prioritizing activities on the ground?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting GICHD at this conference as a mediation organization. So maybe I'll start by explaining why talking about Senegal today, why a partnership with Humanity and Inclusion, and what are we concretely doing. So why Senegal? Senegal is home of to the longest running armed insurrection in Africa. It started back in 1982 when the movement for democratic forces of Casamance asked for and claimed for independence. So Casamance is a region in the south of Senegal, home to around 1.5 million people. And when the conflict lasted for many years, and in total you have 5,000 people that have been victims of the conflict, and around 900 people have been victims of mines, and most of them were civilians. And the conflict also displaced more than 60,000 people along the way. So today there is no end to this conflict. It's a low-intensity conflict, but yet it's not resolved, and it has 3 major consequences for today's conversations. The first one is that you have no reconciliation process within the population in Senegal, not locally, neither nationally. The second consequence is that not all villages that have been displaced have been able to return home. And the third one, which is of interest here, is that a lot of lands have not been cleared, actually. And despite national efforts, and a lot has been done yet, and it's quite a success. So national authorities has been able to depollute more than, I think it's like 2 million meters squares. And so more than 100 villages has been able to return home. And it has been done also in partnership, of course, with Humanity and Inclusion for the technical side. And today you still have 20 villages that are still not back home. And here we also intervene, and I will talk about it. So why a partnership between HD and HI? So maybe I'll go back to what HD is doing in Senegal. So we have been discreetly supporting national efforts to bring peace in Senegal. And we have been mandated back in 2014 to mediate between the government of Senegal and the rebellion, the MFDC. And MFDC is composed of 4 factions, and we mediate between 3 of them and the government. To make a long story short, today you have one faction that has let down weapons and surrendered, and 2 other factions, and one of them actually is led by the historical figure of the MFDC, César, are still in a negotiation process with the government to lay down weapons. We facilitated the last round of negotiation a couple of weeks ago, and we were pleased that the President of Senegal attended the final session. And so we are engaged at this political level for the resolution of the conflict, but we are also engaged at the local level. And here in areas where people have been displaced in the past, we are supporting communities and local authorities in dealing with local conflicts. That comes from issues of chieftaincies, land sharing, natural resource management. And here we try here to pave the way to this reconciliation process that will need first a national peace agreement, but then a lot of work will have to be done locally. And it's because we have this dialogue with the government at national level, but also with local authorities, with communities on the ground, and with the armed group, that we are able to offer our services to humanitarian actors when they face issues of access. So, for instance, it's something that we are also doing in Central African Republic to mediate the access with the armed groups for vaccination campaigns. But here, so closer to us and to the thematic today, we are in partnership with Humanity and Inclusion, where there are issues of access or issues to make sure that we have the right involvement of communities in clearance activities. So what do we concretely do? So national authorities, they decide where land have to be depolluted, and HI support the technical part of it and with the methodology that you described. And we try to help when we can in 2 ways. The first situation is where the MFDC is opposed to the demining process. And so here we engage with the MFDC, we explain the depollution process, we explain the expectations from communities to return home, and we try to see what are their grievances, their reluctance, and what can be decided. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and this part is quite important. I think it's because demining in some areas is an issue for MFDC at the table of negotiation with the state. They can have the impression that it will weaken their position of negotiation when it comes to disarmament and laying down weapons. And so sometimes we can't force, and the political process has to move ahead first before going back to this humanitarian aspect of demining. The second situation where we try to add a little piece to the process is when there is no local consensus about demining. So here we try to gather representatives from local authorities, from army, from communities, remotely with the MFDC. They are not at the table as such, but we make the connection to build a common understanding of what is at stake, again, also to be able to explain the link with the political negotiations, so that we can try to support HI, and you explain the process as well, huh? Of course, we do it together. And it allows to move ahead. So, for instance, in one area, it has been the main result of this local dialogue was the creation of a buffer zone to allow the return of communities and their ability to engage and collaborate in the process. So I'll stop here and maybe conclude by saying that for us, probably we perceive your sector at the crossroad between political issues and humanitarian issues. And so we greatly appreciated the partnership with HI because it's a nice way to complement each other, because in our case, a peace process will need implementation, and implementation, some of the part we won't do, and you can do it. And I think what we can bring also our added value in terms of conflict sensitivity and do no harm by also better integrating this aspect to the political dynamics. Thank you.
Thank you, Celine, for your intervention. I think we have plenty of time. Yeah, we still have the time. So for now, for a couple of minutes, I would like to conduct the moderated discussion part of the panel. So I will refer to one thing that Celine said just moments ago, that is sometimes these plans do work, sometimes they simply do not work. So the question is, perhaps the organization or Celine can share with us a time when a community engagement initiative didn't go as planned, it didn't go as planned, and what did you learn from this experience, or how can these projects reshape their objective in order to be executed in the territory. So I don't know if one of you can speak a little bit about it, if you want to.
If it's related to demining, I'm not sure I'll have a lot of experience to share, but I can talk about local mediation efforts.
Sure.
After you want to go ahead first?
Go ahead. Well, you decide.
Yeah, just a little example of how one initiative that took us, I wouldn't say it didn't work, but it took us extra effort to make it work. And it's actually a work that we were doing in Iraq, in Mosul. So we were liaising with the communities, with a community safety committee that we supported there to decide a small project to promote behavioral change. So we identified that the communities were not, the children had not safe areas to play, so they were, because the park was destroyed. And we have seen these, other actors have done that, but when we were doing the negotiations with the community about like, well, we should do the park, rehabilitate the park that was already there, we were having a lot of resistance. And it's like strange because you wonder who would resist to rehabilitate a park, right? Like, how could this create some conflict? And then we found two things. First one, which is quite simple, some of the neighbors there, they didn't want the noise. So they were like, if the people come, they will just hear. And it's because we're thinking of like deep conflicting situations that we need experts, and it was really like related to the noise. We're like, okay, we can think about the playing times, we can, like it's how the community itself can sort out this challenge. But there were other challenges too related to conflicts between like returnees communities and communities that established there during the war. So they were a bit like this will encourage more people to come, and they were not dealing so well with that part. So of course, the second part requires more time of mediation and collaboration, and also liaising a lot with the local authorities. But yeah, at the end we managed to do it, and the park was rehabilitated and it was used, but it took extra time, and we need to plan also thinking of those little things and the big things about them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sophia, for that example. Really illustrative of how things are not always as we thought they are.
So maybe in my case, I can share another example that is a bit different, because the mining process, you can't talk about it in this context. It's Mali. And Mali, we engage a lot with communities, and basically most of our efforts are focused on supporting communities in stepping out of the conflict, because maybe if you are familiar with the context, you know that the conflict is opposing state to jihadist groups, basically, and communities have been in the middle of it. And for their own security, sometimes they have been forced to choose side, in a sense. It led to intercommunal violence at high level. And so what we do when we are mandated for that is to support communities in their reconciliation process and to help them renegotiate their civilian identity with armed actors. So jihadist groups, self-defense militias, and national army. And in this process, we support communities in negotiating humanitarian dispositions. So to negotiate the return of displaced persons, for instance, to stop some blockades on roads and blockades on villages, on markets, to be able to help communities resume with their economic activities. And here, if we can talk about failure, war it's still going on. So talking about demining would be a way to weaken, in a sense, armed actors, and they won't accept it at this stage. So what you can do is help communities navigating the conflict, supporting them in their resilience efforts, and then what is done throughout the conflict will help at some point, when clearance will be at stake and will be feasible, it will help to connect with those actors that are doing this part of the job. I'll stop here.
May I just add something?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay. Let's not forget that for us donors, we are not only donors, we're from the foreign ministry. So diplomacy has as most noble task conflict settlement. This would be the ideal situation, that we solve the problems and then that we help and accompany the peace-building process and the settlement, the mine action and everything else. But we should not forget that we are there to negotiate, to help, to bring peace to areas, internal conflicts or external conflicts. That's the big thing which we should not forget. Secondly, if we want to help in the country, we have to find accesses to both, to the government, and we call it humanitarian diplomacy, when we are asking people how what we can do. If you cannot find access to the area where we want to do the mine job, we can help, for instance, to go into the Gaza Strip. This is something which is incredibly difficult to bring people or equipment into Gaza Strip. So therefore we can use this instrument which we call humanitarian diplomacy. And then lastly, to speak to the community, what I said before, and with localization, to have access to the people, to the communities, not to spoil our efforts and to create extra harm to our reasonable efforts by doing things not discussed with the local population.
Maybe also just a finding from the research that sort of speaks to what has been mentioned just now. I think often we understand mine action and clearance efforts in a very binary sense, as in land use improves the moment you clear an area. But very often communities have established coping mechanisms already. I've seen on numerous occasions that in South Sudan, for example, when there was mainly cluster munition in places, people were just not digging as deeply, for example. They for example, were cultivating honey instead. So there's coping mechanisms because the land use land is such a scarce resource. And I think we have to keep that in mind, and we have to take that into account in our efforts. But there, most certainly, demining processes take a lot longer when there's a lot of communities around, right? You cannot achieve the same square meters per day average when you have 20 tukuls around and you have to clear those tukuls every time you do a demolition. So in South Sudan, I also witnessed locations not being effectively prioritized because it was such a long time it would take to do the clearance there. I mean, in the end, the tasking, there's a lot of operators, for example, in Magwi, and they're one of the fields that DRC then ended up clearing as one of the operators that was happy to clear it, but we took a lot longer than what the square meters goals that we usually have per day. The average, I think, clearance speed went from 1,500 square meters per day to around 500, right? So you have to, because of those, because of the scrap metal there, because of the presence of communities around, sometimes clearance can take longer, but it's more impactful. So I think those nuances are very, very important to understand. And yeah, it's something that came out very strongly in our study. And we can build on those coping mechanisms and take it into account in our prioritization matrices.
Thanks to everyone. Yeah, I think that the main conclusion would be that there's a lot of, well, not solution, but a lot of ways to revolve around obstacles and restrictions. For example, listening to communities, or for example, asking for help for the international community. So I think that's really important to bear in mind when we in the sector face these kind of problems. Okay, so now we'd love to hear from the people in the room, the people that have listened to these interventions. So if there are any questions, experiences, reflections of what have been said today, I would like to share those thoughts with the rest of the room and the panel. So if anyone have a question, just raise a hand, and there's microphones in all the tables, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. This is not a question. Mostly it's an observation. So first of all, thanks so much to HI and DRC for the presentation, mostly for the excellent work that you are performing in Colombia and so on. I'm Chief Man Action Program of UNMAS in Colombia, so I know pretty much the situation over there. I'm also very glad to know that part of the panel, there is GICHD. So I will use this as a hook to my observation. So I believe that most importantly, and day by day, we have seen the overall humanitarian mine action turning into a very useful tool, not only to implement the technical job, no, but also to help countries developing political issues as well. The mine action has been developing more and more often into a tool, into an enabler for peace processes, supporting humanitarian processes as well. So recently, I would like to highlight also a very positive experience that is happening in Colombia, where thanks to the support of the Multi-Donor Fund for Peace, which is supporting also from Germany, Switzerland, Norway, and other countries, it has been possible, to use mine action as an enabler for the peace process, and also to support the fulfillment of the treaty, the peace treaty of the 2016, and precisely the compliance with the former combatants, the FARC, and the former armed group participant, into an initiative that is aimed at sharing information on the use of explosive ordnance, on the strategy, on basically the setting up of minefields and the use of specific tools and traps, explosive traps. So I think, again, just a point of reflection from my side, I think this is very important to to reflect on, especially in the Colombia case, where we have seen a demonstration that the humanitarian mine action is very useful to broader processes like the peace process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio. Yeah, I'm proud to say that I'm working also in that project, so it is really interesting to see how it develops over the time, hopefully. So if there is any question, yeah, back there, Ayla, please.
Thanks, everybody, for the very interesting panel. Sorry, I'm just kind of hiding here, but I'm here. I think my question, it's actually related to the statement about Senegal. In 2019, I worked for the Implementation Support Unit of the Mine Ban Convention. And thanks to the European Union, we have a project in which we supported Senegal, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Mine Action Center having a dialogue, national stakeholders dialogue, to talk about security and access. So there was all of this community engagement. There was the Les Femmes pour la Paix. There were several organizations. There were police, as well as important donors, United States, Germany, that sat with us during 2 to 3 days to discuss some of this. It ended up that for the first time in several years, there was an opening, and actually there was new engagement with the Mine Action Center and with the HI, which is the operator. And there was some clearance. Then later on, the pandemic hit, et cetera. And I just wonder if there have been any new national stakeholder engagement. I know there is a new Mine Action Center director in Senegal that might have changed things. I know Germany is still very much involved in Senegal, and I just was wondering, as Senegal is one of those countries that actually we would be very interested in supporting in the new phase of the project if the EU approves a new project. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was clearly directed to Celine, so if you wanna...
Thank you, and it's a lovely, tricky question for me, because I'm Geneva-based and not based in Dakar. I'm sure my team would know, and we can stay in touch, and I can let you know later on. But maybe I would like also to add one quick comment about Colombia, and more generally speaking. Mine action is a nice element also for a peacemaker to think about confidence building measure in a peace process, definitely. And another element is that, well, I should say before or until 2023, a peace agreement is only a starting point. It's a lot of effort. It can take many years to reach a peace agreement, but it's still a starting point. The implementation phase is the most critical one when it comes to changing lives also on the ground. And here again, the mine action can be interesting as a confidence building measure, not only for negotiating peace, but for implementing it. Because in a peace process, as you know, all sides will test the chain of commands of the other side at some point. And clearly, when it comes to mine clearance, you can test that. So it's an important element, definitely, of a peace process. Unfortunately, today, peace is not really trendy anymore. War is more on the forefront. So that's why I was talking about yesterday and today. And more, we have to use more imagination to still give peace a chance, as we say.
Yeah, sorry, a little comment related to that. On Monday in Colombia, we have the great news that one of the peace processes managed to get one of the rebel groups, which is called Comuneros del Sur, to destroy almost 500 explosive ordnance elements on Monday. So that was great news and shows how in these peace processes, mine action plays a big role and creates trust within communities. So that was a little news about the situation in Colombia. So I don't know if there's any other question from the assistants here today. Seems like there is not, so maybe we can closed today's panel. So I would like to ask the panelists one short reflection before we let you go to lunch. So perhaps if you want to, just one sentence or one headline of what do you want to people to stay in the minds of people here today, it would be great if each of you can give one final point, and then we will close up the session. Yeah, go ahead, Doctor.
The one sentence would be put people in the head or in the focus. Yeah, put people in the head of focus. Don't think about minds, because this is our job. That is something we have to do. But think about the concerned people as a starting point.
Great, thank you.
And maybe to build on that, because I think it's connected, making links between political and humanitarian issues helps communities in the end. So it's the beginning. Our work as mediator is really to support communities and people, but the link between political and humanitarian issues is key.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe to build on that, just to reiterate conflict sensitivity and localization. But I think the session today has shown that there's the importance of a middleman or middle woman in that case is very, very important. And it's constantly exploring that in order to gain access and to make our way to address community needs. Thanks.
I was thinking of something quite linked to that, and it's like we cannot take access for granted. Even in protracted crises, we need to work hard on building communities' capacities. So in case of, as in the case of Gaza and often in Colombia, if something happens, the community has the capacity to respond and to cope while we can actually come and add more help. That was not one phrase, but that's the Colombian style.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, thanks. First of all, thank you for, all of you on the panel. That was great. I think it was very thought-provoking for everyone here. And thank you all for being part of this exchange. I hope that this session has sparked new questions, ideas, maybe even partnerships among people here today. And my headline, though I have it already prepared, is the pathway to access isn't just about removing mines, but it's about opening spaces for peace, for trust, and for communities to move forward in their own terms, whatever they are. So thanks again, and well, please enjoy the rest of your time at this last day at the NDM, and we have 3 minutes for lunch. Thank you.